Hello, Shane Stair, founder, Journeyman Hammocks, journeymanhammocks.com. Here today to talk to you about how to set up the Journeyman Hammock Camp Shelter. Now, the shelter sets up independently of the bed. So normally I would hang the bed first, then I could drape the shelter over top of the ridgeline of the bed and do all of my attachments hence. However, there are occasions where setting up the shelter first makes sense. For example, let's say you arrive to your camp location and it has started to rain. Or maybe you don't plan to hang the bed, you just simply want to set up the shelter. Since the shelter is independent of the bed, these options are possible. The Journeyman Hammock Camp Shelter Kit consists of these 5 components: the shelter, the ground stakes, suspension, guylines, and optional door kit. Now, inside each of these kits, you'll find not only the lines themselves, but also a set of easy to follow illustrated instructions. Contained also here is a QR code that links to this video series. The first step to setting up the Journeyman Hammock Camp Shelter is setting the suspension line around the tree. The suspension line consists of 3 parts: the carabiner at the end, the loop at the other end, and the adjusting slider in the middle. To set this on the tree, you take the carabiner around the tree, pass it through the loop, make sure it passes over the adjusting slider, make your adjustments, and voila. Do this on both sides. We'll take the carabiner, connect it to the grommets of the shelter itself, and then use the adjusting buckle or the adjusting slider to draw it tight. Now that the suspension lines have been hung around the trees, next step is to remove the shelter from the stuff sack and attach it to the carabiners at the end of the suspension lines. The next step will be to guy out the ends of the shelter. We will use the guy lines contained in this package to do this procedure. The guy lines are very similar to the suspension lines for the shelter that we just used. Only instead of a carabiner, there will be a plastic hook on one end, still the open loop at the other, and the adjusting slider in the middle. If we're setting up the shelter in the typical A-frame fashion, we would grab the corner end with the grommet, take the plastic loop, or hook rather, pass it through, stretch out the guy line, grab our ground stake, set it about at the appropriate location. Never push the ground stake in with the palm of your hand. It's hard and it hurts. So what I recommend doing is finding a rock that fits into the palm of your hand and use that to drive the stake home. Pro tip. Go ahead, loop that end around, and once all 4 of the guy lines are set in place, we'll come back and adjust our slide adjusters here to make sure everything's good and taut. And there it is. Basic setup, A-frame style for the Journeyman Hammock Camp Shelter. Now, if you'd like to see it set up with doors, the optional door system, stay tuned. Set up using the doors, the optional door kit, what you do is instead of connecting your guy lines to the corners here, all right, you set your guy lines to the set of webbing loops. They're just in from the corner, leaving the corner free. Because what we're going to do with the doors is we're going to take these 2 corners here, we're going to bring the grommets together, and we're going to stake them down to the ground. Now what that'll allow us to do is close in the end of our shelter for more privacy and a little more protection from the elements, or if it's cool outside, it'll help retain the heat a little bit better inside the shelter. And then we'll still be able to open a door to gain access to and to exit from our camp. All right, so our door guy line, it's just like the suspension and just like the other guy lines in that it has, well, more like the suspension guy line in that it has a carabiner at this end, a loop at this end, and the slide adjuster. So what I've done here is I've grabbed a hold of the 2 loose ends, the 2 corners, I've brought the 2 together, the 2 grommets, overlapped them with the door that I plan to use to enter and exit on top. I take the carabiner, pass it through both grommets, extend it down, and set my stake. Gotta grab my handy stake setting rock. Oh, I hit a rock, change location. There we go. Go ahead and set it, adjust it, and there it is. Now, if I want to enter or exit, all I have to do is to press the gate on the carabiner and unhook the one side. The rear door stays attached. The other door is now free to open. Want to close it back up? Just clip it in place. This is what your Journeyman Hammock Camp Shelter will look like when properly set up with the doors. I hope the information here helps you get the best experience out of your Journeyman Hammock camp. Be sure to check out the other instructional videos in this series.